maybe you're not being fair. Maybe you don't value the things that you're saying that should be done.
Companies at different stages have different incentives and different goals.
It's about being conscious, right? What you're rewarding and figuring that out.
Because they know that at the end, that's what that manager values.
What are some good incentives that we should have in engineering organizations?
Today, we're going to talk about the real incentives to do things, right? The topic of discussion is an article that I found, one of the principal engineers where you work sent me. That's titled, People Can Read Their Manager's Mind. And I think like the high level summary of that is oftentimes the managers will say things, but they truly value other things, right? And the articles go into examples of the manager that really values people's like innovative architecture ideas or innovation, but ask the team to fix bugs and all that. When it comes to rewards, when it comes to calibration and performance cycle, the manager will always prioritize people that did the things that, not the things that they told they wanted, but the things that they internally actually value more, right? Like and I think the thing on the article is that managers feel that the engineers cannot tell that, but they can tell in far away, right? And they go into some examples, and it's really interesting, like how those patterns of managers appear again and again. I think like they talk about a manager enjoys software architecture, design patterns, and language. The manager requests a corporation to have more collaboration with the other teams, but people tend to keep the design more patterns into their programs than to actually try to collaborate, because they know that at the end, that's what that manager values, right? And I think the article goes on and actually talks about some of other examples, and basically is mind-blowing, or was mind-blowing to me to read that, because I felt that it was the only one that had this impression. I feel a lot of times as a manager, you try to go with the company or to try to really feel what the moment actually deserves, but internally you have your biases and you have your things that you keep falling back, and maybe you're not being fair. Maybe you don't value the things that you're saying that should be done. And I think Louis has a true story of how he changed the game on that, using one of those, say, things that the organization really value at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that article, Thiago. That was an awesome article. I think generally, basically, these things can go haywire inadvertently, where you're accidentally rewarding sort of the wrong behavior. And I have this story, right? Because I was at a fairly early stage startup. We were building a whole lot of stuff. The company was very tech driven, a lot of amazing engineers there. And so we took outages very seriously. And we had a bunch of outages because as a startup, we were moving crazy fast and all these other things. And so we valued paying down tech debt. We valued all these things that tech driven organizations value. And one of the teams, specifically the API team, sort of went haywire, where one day they had this massive outage, brought down the site, and then that tech leadership said, you know what, enough's enough. We need to sort of institute this, what they call the code purple. We need to shut everything down, and we're gonna pay down this tech debt. We're gonna institute this thing called error budgets. For me at the time, I was managing a small team. I was learning some great things from these people while they were dealing with this massive outage, right? And immediately that team, from this massive outage, got lots of headcount. They got so much help. Everyone stopped, right? Everything. And they just helped this one team. And then lo and behold, me and my team, we were killing ourselves. Like we were working night and day to get these features out. We would wake up when there was something that would go wrong to try to prevent. We had tons of alerts for all kinds of things, but to try not to basically break this promise we made to our business partner and customers. But the realization was like, if you want the attention, you're going to have to let some bugs slip through the cracks. And look, it's not like I was trying to be malicious, right? But we were literally killing ourselves, right? Working night and day to try to get this stuff so it didn't have those kinds of incidents. And we said, look, we need to stop doing this. They need to feel the pain we're feeling. And the only way they're going to feel the pain we're feeling is if we're up there at the podium explaining why we have a massive outage. And lo and behold, it's like that story from the Bible, right? Where I think Abraham goes after the one sheep that runs away and they're so focused on it. And then after they find that one sheep, they have a party, they're so happy. And it messed up that it works that way. But that's how it works. And so lo and behold, basically, we had a pretty big outage, and then my team was the focus. And my team got the help, and my team got the headcount. And these things happen inadvertently. And this is a very tech-driven company. This is a very tech-driven organization. They weren't maliciously trying to push these kinds of incentives down, but that's what happened. And these kinds of things can happen a lot. And I would say the opposite can also happen. If the company is not very tech-driven, if the company does not care about paying down their tech debt, you could inadvertently end up rewarding people pushing out tons and tons of tech debt without ever paying it down at all. You might say you love paying down tech debt, but that might not happen. But also, like I just said, the opposite could happen. And so this is sort of the story for that. And I actually wrote about this in my article a little while ago. And it's just this kind of this thing that I think happens inadvertently a lot of the time. People mean well, but maybe someone can jump in and chime in with their own.
I mean, you never let a good crisis go to waste. You have a good crisis, and I actually believe this. If you have a bad problem, I love being on call, okay? I know a lot of people are like, on call is the worst, but I love being on call. I like thrive when shit is just breaking. I don't want shit to break. But when stuff is on fire, I jump in there and I fix things even that are not wrong with like my code. If some other team's system is causing this, I'll open an issue and I'll tag it with this sev, and I'll be like, this thing is like an underlying root cause and we need to fix this guy. And I will just mark it as a betterment from myself, because this is when everyone's eyes are on you and you need to make sure. And I'm not abusing the system. I am, but I'm abusing it for good, right? This is the moment. We're like, these are like low priority issues for these people, and they're probably never going to get to that one bug. They're like, hey, it rarely happens. No, it happened during my Sev 1. You caused my Sev 1, and I need you to fix this, and I'm going to tag that in a room with 6 VPs in it. And I'm also going to assist you with the code review and getting it out, all of that, but you don't let a good crisis go to waste. I think that's the lesson I hope that you learn from this, is that that team, a crisis happened and they increased headcount, they got more resources, they made sure that, hopefully they make sure that particular issue doesn't happen again. If they keep screwing this up every week, that's just a waste. Come on, use the Sev to better yourself.
That's hilarious. Thanks for sharing, Vic. My best buddy, he's a SRE/ops engineer, and they have on call. He's one of the senior folks. So even if he's not on call or somebody on the team can figure out, he gets pinged, and he just thrives on that. The rush of trying to figure out what is broken, what part of the system is broken, and what can be done to fix it quickly so that you can bring the systems back online, right? I'll confess, I'm exactly the opposite. Those situations stress me out. I don't want to be in that room with 7 VPs trying to explain why my service went down. This has nothing to do with my title, my pay. It's just temperament. Those are situations I'm trying to avoid, like the bubonic plague. I will go to lengths to make sure that my service is stable. We have enough testing, enough soak time so that we don't get to it. In fact, I recently, my manager called me out and said, oh, you aren't in these emergency patch reviews. You aren't doing as many emergency fixes in the middle of the night. Look at this other team, how quickly they are fixing issues and they're getting all the attention. But it seems like you don't want the attention. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. And I can see both sides of the coin, right? I can see the visibility that Louis was talking about, which you get only in this situation. And you probably get more headcount than the rest of the department combined, just because they want to get the ship sailing again. They want us to start moving.
I don't want headcount. I just need you to fix your problem that you were previously ignoring because you thought it was a low priority issue that wouldn't occur. And now it's happened. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, it is a great story and great example. I was going to say that I think there are two kinds of engineers, or when you are on call, when you are on a crash, on an incident, I think there are the engineers that are going to thrive on that are going to really enjoy, and they really get on flow state, and they are as productive as they would never be on normal focus hours. And I think that's big. And really enjoy doing a little bit of chaos engineering, right? If there is any chance that anything that is wrong, Vic is going to find it and he's going to make noise so everybody can hear it. And you better not have a false alarm going off when Vic is on call, right? He's not going to tolerate all those like false alarms going off and just, okay, just shut it off and we're not after it again. He's going to go after and he's going to fight you. And I think the other kind of engineers, and I think that's more care, that they're just trying to avoid attention. And when there is like a crash, an incident, they actually avoid opening the incident, that they really try not be on the spotlight. And I think you need to find like who are the firefighters that really enjoy that and who are the people that are maybe better off trying to write more tests or improve the reliability from another angle. Because I think the two sides of the coin are really important. But I know we are getting off incentives here. But like the final thing I want to say about the article, I found one passage that I feel is really powerful, and that one got me when I was reading it. And maybe it is the main takeaway is that they say that managers who can make themselves value how important work should at least realize this. Their goals do not automatically become their employees' goals. On the contrary, much or most of a manager's job is to align these goals. And if it were that easy, perhaps they would not pay managers that much. Now, would they? I find it blessing to be able to tell a manager, you don't really value this work, so it won't get it done. It won't get done. And I think that's like so true, right? But it is so hard to see things. You often will say things and people will not pay attention. You can like make noise, give feedback, and that sometimes is because you don't truly value that thing. And on the other end, when people know what you really truly value, they will do the work to satisfy the true need, not what you're asking, right? So what you're asking is going to be often ignored, but it is super hard.
I think this leads us back to the original question, right? What are some good incentives that we should have in engineering organizations? Because these are both, I think, a little contrary to each other, right? You have these unsung heroes that show up as knight in shining armor, like weak at 2 a.m. to uphold the system or bring it back online in 6 minutes because Vic knows exactly where to go, what to do. And so Vic saved the company millions of dollars because he reduced the outage time from 60 minutes to 6 minutes, as opposed to all these other people who are working diligently to make sure that they go the extra mile to make sure that there isn't an outage, but they never get any acknowledgement because, oh, well, it's BAU. You are just doing what you're supposed to, which is maintaining your SLA and SLO, and that's what you are here to do. That's your job. That's what you get paid for. Thank you. Move along.
I think it's basically about sort of being conscious of the incentives, right? Like these things, the whole point of sort of my story is not that it's bad that we stopped, that we sort of allowed this one team to shore up their system and to have wonderful APIs and to hire and do all these other things. It's just that you just stop the world for a month, let's say, for these people to get everything together. And at the same time, you just sort of gave off to every other engineering manager, even though you're saying that you reward people that have systems that don't have issues and all these other things. You just basically inadvertently showed them that the way you're going to get headcount is when you have these issues, when you have these things fly by, and not for working 24 hours, right? And so that happens inadvertently, right? No one's intentionally, I feel, trying to sort of do that to anybody. But I think it's basically all about being conscious of what's happening, right? Or what are we rewarding? And I had that story with that. I tell that story online, but I told my manager that. I said, look, you saw what we just did? You saw that, Seb? Well, this is the only way to get your attention, man. Pay attention. And I think it's just about being conscious, right? What you're rewarding and figuring that out. And part of it was like, maybe we should have let those, playing devil's advocate, maybe we should have let that team feel the pain for a little while. Maybe we should have just not given them headcount right away. And of course, that's messed up because like at the end, our customer's suffering. But you know what I'm saying? This is a balance. This is a scale that we've got to weigh things out. And you could be saying one thing to people and inadvertently rewarding something else. And it might not even be with money. You might just be rewarding with headcount, with attention, with all the things, right? You're making them look like heroes because they fixed something that they caused. So anyway, and one other thought I have on this real quick before I hand it up to Vic. What I love about what Vic said is that basically this kind of stuff, right? Although it might sound bad, it's like that story of the sheep, right? It's like, why does God rejoice when the sinner turns around? It sounds bad that God cares so much about that one lost sheep, But, and then you realize we're all sinners, right? And so the point is that what Vic is saying in some ways is basically it's making things anti-fragile, right? Like when these things happen and these systems go down and things like this happen and somebody is nitpicking and comes alive and is just chasing every one of these things that would otherwise not get done, that's actually good for the greater parts of the whole. I'm just sort of just throwing that one in there.
I would say that there's a few different things here, right? So I think it's bad to have unreliable systems. I don't think anyone is going to disagree. I think it's bad. But when a crisis happens, I think it's important to use that crisis to better yourself and to ensure that bad thing does not happen again. Because if you don't, and if that same thing happens again, or whatever was the root cause of that happens again, you're just a bad engineer. You're a bad engineer, you're a bad engineering manager who's not prioritizing these things. And these things will and should come up when you do incident review in your organization. Now, a lot of organizations will have a weekly or monthly, you should probably do it weekly and just cancel it. If you don't have any incidents review, good for you. But you have like weekly incident reviews where you go over like every SEV 0 to 3 that happened and come up with what the root cause was, what betterments have we created from that bad thing happening. And then you do organization-wide one where it's a different audience, where you're presenting the worst of these SEVs to your VP level up, showing this bad thing happened. And it's a blameless culture, right? Like if you have a culture, you should accept responsibility. I did a thing and it was bad, but there are 7 people who reviewed that code and it went out and you killed it. You're welcome to fire all 8 of us, but that's not going to help anybody. I may be the responsible party, but I also need to, be part of the system that's fixing this. So you have a blameless culture and you accept the fact that no one is to blame, but this entire team is responsible for the thing and you have to fix that thing and you need to get better at it. If the same team is responsible for 90% of the issues, man, they need a change in leadership. Heads have to roll because you can't keep rewarding bad behavior. I think there's a difference between rewarding bad behavior and shifting resources around to dig a team out. Yeah, and also that's really bad that Louis' team is killing themselves working so much. That's just bad. You guys should have stopped. Make it 40, 50-hour weeks. But, it's hard when you're in startup culture. Everyone is doing that, really. Some teams are working 80 hours. Some teams are working 75 hours. What do you do? No one's counting, and some teams, the organization is going to decide, they're they're the profit center, and we have to dig them out. And unfortunately, you guys are just like, you can work a little bit extra to like solve whatever problem that you have.
This is great, Vic, and I love the fact that you said that kind of like blameless postmortems and all that. And I think that the fact that kind of like we should not be basically waiting for the same root causes again and again. And I feel that I work in a company now that is really truly on that side of the equation, and I have seen how that happened. And I have worked in other organizations where it's like a truly blame culture. And even though at high level, they would not say that, but I remember getting emails of my VP sending over a pull request on this person did this, that caused this bug, and what are you going to do about it? And in a really bad way. And that caused a lot of problems. And I was trying to shield the engineers from that. It was really hard. But I was actually going to talk about something else. About when I was at this company, I remember that I had a VP that truly, he was the one that loved innovation. And he was always the one partnering with new vendors, bringing up new ideas. And while like my team and part of my managers org were like completely underwater, there was another director in another org doing innovation projects and doing big changes on the code base that would break everything else. And they would present with VP and the VP would love it. And even though we were like on a super high deadline, we would have to work with them to get something that was not even planned in production, just because the VP loved the idea that this innovation was something the VP would be able to present and would be something super shiny. So I have seen how the true incentives, and the VP would never say that, right? He would never say innovation is the thing that I value. But that director knew that, and he would use that again and again.
I love that story. And I sort of want to tell one other story that I think is very much related. While I was working for Walmart, I used to go to Bentonville, Arkansas. And and that's where their headquarters are. And Walmart is a pretty big company, right? And people there knew Sam Walton. Like, people have been at that company in the town in Bentonville for so long that they were there when Sam Walton was there. And in the 90s, I guess, or maybe late 80s, there was a story that they told me where one of the people in operations had accidentally ordered 2 times as much stuff for one of the warehouses. Now, the warehouse can hold, I don't know, at the time it was like $30 million worth of goods or something. So he had ordered 2 times as much, and there was nowhere to put it because the warehouse was full. And Sam Walton used to have this Saturday meeting with everybody, with all hands. And Saturday morning, you could show up if you want to, just to find out what was happening with the company. It's like a half hour. It's a small town, Bentonville, whatever. People showed up, and the guy was there who made the order, and he asked them to come up. And he said, so if you see a lot of stuff in the parking lot of that warehouse, because this gentleman ordered twice as much. Obviously the guy apologized. He felt bad. He said, look, you're going to fire me? I don't blame you. And Sam Walton was like, well, if I fire you, the next guy might order 3 or 4 times more. So now I know you're at least never going to make this mistake again. I'm definitely not going to fire you because this was like a valuable lesson that you're never going to forget. And so it's a very interesting thing. And I think that's exactly what happens with engineers if you blame them. What's going to happen is the next guy is going to create brand new bugs that you couldn't even imagine because they're going to have to come up to speed with all this stuff and all these other things.
Yeah. So at several jobs ago, I basically did roughly the equivalent of dropping prod. I say it that way because what happened was, it's too complicated for this call, but ultimately the buck stopped with me and we dropped prod. And the backup systems had not been verified. There were no backups. And the previous backup was like over a week old. What had happened, however, was that we had all of these various order emails that went out. It wasn't like all of prod. It was like this one particular database that got dropped. We had all these order emails that went out. And effectively, like, I came up with this way to read all of those emails and like sort of rebuild the database. Okay. So that's what needed to happen. But when I discovered this, I realized the full ramifications of what happened. I called my CEO and I explained what had just happened. And I was like, I'm going to fix this and then I'm going to resign. This is a massive fuck up. I'm going to resign. And he's, no, I'm not going to let you resign. You know how to fix this issue. You're never going to do it again. And you know what? He's absolutely right. This is the betterment I created in my own head is like looking at everything 16 freaking times and never letting any of this happen. I'm the most like conservative person now in terms of making sure there's 40,000 backups and you can always go back and like all of these different logging and everything because this has bit me in the ass and I'm never ever going to let this happen, right? It was really bad. And secondly, he was like, I need you to get off this call and I don't want you to fix anything. I just need you to go on a walk, take the dog out. He was like, take Gus and Winnie, my dog's name. So take them out for a walk, go walk a mile, and then come back and then get on your computer. And I didn't realize like how like level-headed this was, but that was like a day that like the entire company could have gone down, and it didn't. So I went on that walk, came back, wrote this script, and basically everyone from the company, it was a very small company at the time, everyone from the company came in, we sat around a conference room, and like we basically got all this data back into the database. It took several days, but it's nothing in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, you don't fire the guy or woman, you don't fire the person that fucked up because they probably know how to fix it and they're never going to make that mistake again. And that's why it's important to have like sort of a blameless culture of accepting responsibility, but not crapping on that person for doing that. Because then they're not going to admit it when something bad happens.
It's funny, I worked at a company where it was 100% blame game. Before trying to figure out what went down, the question was always, who did it? And they don't even want to know what happened or how bad it is or what the consequences are. The first question is who did it? And it was called the middle finger salute, where you just point in both directions and say, it wasn't me. So then there's meeting after meetings to figure out who did it, who reviewed it. But often it's never an isolated incident, right? There's applications and they have underlying libraries which are built by other teams. Then it's always a perfect storm. So everyone is trying not to get fired over it and not to get the bad publicity. So each one spends 10, 15 minutes trying to defend themselves to the point where each team and each engineering manager has to do a PowerPoint presentation explaining why it wasn't them and their team and why they shouldn't be the ones let go, or it shouldn't be someone from their team. So to Vic's point, you're never going to learn anything from that culture, right? So obviously the person that made the mistakes is let go, and may or may not make the same mistakes elsewhere. But nobody else on the team learned anything other than fear, where, oh shit, if I screw something up, that means my head is on the line. So nobody will take...
No. If someone finds out that I screwed up.
Exactly. So no one is going to do anything innovative. No one is going to push the envelope. And you're going to always be stuck with status quo, right? And then top down, people come down and say, oh, we want to be the best in our domain. We want to be the best place to work. And then these behaviors are what drives outcomes, right? So that I definitely agree, because you are incentivizing the wrong things by doing such a thing.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of where the incentives are destroying innovation. And you'll be surprised, because I actually think most of corporate America has that problem. Most of corporate America that is not tech-driven has that problem, where they want the innovation, but at the same time, they don't want the bugs. And the moment that they have the bugs, they just get really upset. So the incentives just, it's their Achilles heel, right? Like they're inadvertently, they probably don't mean to kill innovation, but they are inadvertently killing innovation by having a blameful culture. And I think that's what big tech figured out, basically, that if you have that blameless culture, it's really good. But I want to go back to something Tiago said, because I don't want to lose it. And basically, it's this idea on the other side where the management values innovation over everything else, which I think is more common. And one common scenario that I personally saw at a financial institution, I don't want to name names and all that, but I had a manager who was very technical, right? Came up because he was so good technically. And then the director, or the managing director, and the PM, they loved innovation, but the manager was all about technical excellence. So now you have this dichotomy. You have these two people, or these groups of people that value different things. And now you're stuck in the middle, because you go to the meetings, you see that the person that holds your promotion, the person that's going to reward you at the end of the day, he does not value all this technical debt you're paying down. They value you pushing this innovative thing out. And your manager thinks that innovative thing is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be so much maintenance, so much stuff. And so I think this actually happens all the time. And so I'd love for people to sort of touch on this one too. I didn't want to lose this one.
Yeah, no, I love that one. I was actually going to go back to a story. So on one of these previous jobs of mine, there was a story that this VP would tell to everyone on their onboarding. Like, he would find a way on a water cooler conversation. He would always tell the story that, like, back in the day, there was a vendor that rewrote the payment flow, and they made a mistake where whenever you selected which bank account you want to make the payment from, they would always get from index 0, right? And then there was this huge problem for months to people that didn't have balance on their bank account. They selected the wrong account, and then this vendor was turned off. And that was the onboarding. That's, don't make this mistake again. You're rewriting this whole thing, but remember this story, like this, all this consequences of doing this. It's like you get there with that pressure. Like that was the onboarding of the game, the blame game. But yeah, that was just one of the stories that you tell. We're also telling stories behind me, that it's like on the all hands meeting, you say, look guys, we really value your kind of resilience and blameless. You can go back, but you told me that story and that vendor is no longer working for us.
So maybe prices aside, we should get into what are some good incentives or good practices to form good engineering organizations, right? Even if they're startups and going very fast, what are some things that companies can do from day one to enable good culture so that people are still doing their best work? They are still prioritizing the right things, whether that's keeping systems up and online or doing innovative stuff that others aren't doing. Whatever their metric is, how do you incentivize teams, engineers to do the right thing? And I get it's different strokes for different folks, right? Like the person that values a bigger bonus or a bigger paycheck because he really needs to get a big down payment on his first house isn't going to be as incentivized by a feature that he really wants to build or a project he really wants to launch out the door. He just cares about the money. And there might be others that are 5 years close to retirement. They don't care about the money. They don't care about the office politics. They just want to get this one feature right or one project out the door because that's their last big hurrah before they retire. And that's what they want to go out the door being remembered for, or that's what will fill their bucket. So how do you folks envision structuring your teams or your organizations that will help both individuals, managers, and then even intrinsically, right? Because you hear stories. Like, I think all of us shared stories of some point, either through the water cooler chat, something that happened with us or our teams. And this is long after we've left these companies, long after we've left these teams. So these stick with people a long time after they've actually happened. So what are some good incentives we can put in place for orgs and teams that will encourage the right behavior?
We have organizational priorities, right, of things that we need to hit. It's really just, is your team like hitting those priorities that we've set for the organization, and are you contributing things? And within a team, right, you also want to make sure that someone is not just watching out for themselves. Are you making sure, are you participating in stand-up and other team routines? Are you doing code review? The thing is, I'm not in the business of, and we've spoken about this, I'm not in the business of measuring how many code reviews someone is doing, but at some point it becomes obvious if one person is not doing enough code review. Right? If they're not really being part of the team, they're not speaking up. And this is sort of the role of both a manager as well as your staff plus engineers on your team, noticing and being that like right hand of the manager and saying, so-and-so is struggling or is like completely checked out. And these things become very obvious to the team. If one person is routinely the reason for 90% of the defects because they're just cowboy coding. They're not writing any tests. Unless your team is like 30 people, it's very unlikely that there's not going to get caught. There's 4 to 6 people on a team, it's going to be really obvious who's contributing how.
The one thing I was going to say is, of course, like blameless culture, but really be the one that's not only championing for like more post-mortems, but actually like helping to prioritize things and help to make sure that folks that were part of those that caused the mistake, that were part of the crashes, should really feel that there are no consequences to that. But I think the other thing I was gonna say is like people will truly pay attention when you start to let someone go, when you let people go, right? And when you don't let that go months and months on. So I think that I have seen managers that would let a bad performer or someone being more than a zero-sum programmer or a net negative programmer sit around for a while, and people would get frustrated and they would start to replicate that behavior. And the moment that you have a manager that acts fast, like I'm not telling about, I think everyone can have bad weeks, but if you have 2-3 bad months in a row, that's a conversation, right? And I think like letting people go like fast, especially after onboarding things that are not really working out, I think is something that will really drive a lot of attention. People will like, okay, I see that like you cannot just sit around and not do reviews, or I can see how that's important. I think the other thing is the obvious one, right? Like promotions and calibrations and ratings, what you present to your managers, what you say, no, this person did just business as usual. Like they're trying to make this big case for someone that did bury the job description. You need to be the one calling that off. I think like those are the things that really would have some like effect on incentives. The other thing is, I would say, appreciating folks that are going above and beyond, even if it's not the thing that you value the most as a manager internally, like sending a message on the team channel, hey, thanks for going above and beyond, doing this thing, staying late, or whatever you want to value. And I know staying late is a problem as well if you are valuing that. But then you need to be, and I think the last thing you're going to say, I had this one-on-one with a peer of mine today, and he had a remarkable idea, because we have all this crazy projects. So we have things we want to work for the roadmap, things that are really going to move the needle. On the other side, we have crises and we have new business like priorities. So there are things like, oh, there is this new client that needs to onboard, but for that, I need to create a new shard because their volume is so high. And the idea he had, and I felt it was brilliant, was like he created like a how we make decisions here on this department. And he basically created a priority list of things. This is P0, like stability, for example. There is nothing that will justify removing someone out of the sad one, right? That if there is something happening, if there is something happening in production, that's the absolute priority 0. Then it's like maybe regulatory and compliance issues. That's 2. And then I think the tricky part, and basically trying to compile that and share, guys, this is our priority. Whenever there is a new project, I want you to go. And even if it's coming from the CEO, you can say, we have this, and according to what we value and what we agree on, this should have higher priority than this. And I think you can do that to a lot of aspects. And having that transparency might help to really align the incentives, or at least to know where to focus. And if you see someone focus on priority 5 when there's like a crash happening, someone new to on board, right? Is like, you can like explicitly say, here are the priorities, you're not following that, pay attention to that. And if that happens again, then it's a feedback. If it happens again, then it's the PID, whatever it is. But you need to make those things explicit, because even for managers, even for directors, even for VPs, it's really hard to know why certain thing had higher priority, why someone else was promoted, right? And I think, but those things are, I think, the things that really truly move the needle.
I love that story, Thiago. There's this great story about FedEx that I want to bring in, because we can't really talk about incentives without bringing this up. I think it was in the 70s or 60s or something like that. It's like the story that's touted that about figuring out incentives, but I think it highlights 2 important parts. They used to load up these planes when FedEx was first started, and the employees that would load up the plane were paid by the hour. And basically, by the end of the night would come and the plane still wasn't loaded, right? So they were trying to figure out, how come these planes are not getting loaded? I know we have more packages, this and that. And so the owner went down to where they were loading them and saw these guys moving, like they weren't moving very fast, all these other things. So he decided, you know what? We're going to pay you the full night's wage. Basically, it doesn't matter when you fill it up. You're getting the same amount, whether you fill it up in 3 hours or 8 hours. Every single night, everything was filled up in 3 or 4 hours instead of 8 hours now. Not only did they actually fill up the plane, but they filled it up in half the time, right? Because they were getting the full amount of money. And it's like sort of the original story around incentives. But I think it highlights something important besides the incentive aspect, is that even the founder of this company couldn't figure it out. He had to go there and get the intuition, see what the hell's going on in order to figure that out. And this is why it's so hard to be prescriptive about incentives, because so much of this, I think, is dependent on the stage of the company. What they value at that point in time is dependent on the type of company. For example, if you're a very early stage company, you value revenue, you value money more than anything. Who cares about tech debt when we're making no money? We're not going to be around in 6 months if we don't increase the revenue. But if you're like at Walmart and they're making $500 billion a year, if you can increase the thing by 10 million, but you added a ton of debt, dude, no one cares. Like, you get out of here. You just created a ton of work for a lot of people. And so it's just, these are very different things that are just by stage. But then imagine now, you layer on, what if you're in, when I was at Walmart, we were in pharmacy. Now pharmacy, people could die if you have bugs in the thing and you give someone the wrong prescription and whatever, right? Like, people could literally die on the other side if your prescription system is not filling the things correctly. And so how do you value that now? Like, those are very different types of incentives around bugs and around all these things. And so I just think it's very hard to be prescriptive. But what's really important is that you're honest about it and you have these honest conversations with each other, like you and your friend Thiago, just basically, you and your colleague, just basically figure out, look, this is what we're rewarding right now. We reserve the right to change this shit because things might change over the next couple of months. And at that point in time, we might shift our incentives. And just being honest means that everyone could be like, your report, like I did with my manager, could come to you and say, hey man, like, you're rewarding the people that are introducing all the bugs. And so guess what? I'm one of the guys introducing bugs. And so just having these very honest conversations with each other, I think, leads to a place where everyone's rewarded properly and everything's moving in the right direction, in the direction that we all want to be going, rather than not being honest about it, not being upfront, and just inadvertently letting the incentives destroy everything.
I want to plus one the thing that you said about the different stages, right? This is very much like the old Facebook, the young Facebook, their whole move fast and break things. And the reason for that was that they needed to ship code, they needed to ship new features ASAP, capture people's attention. But at some point, you can't keep doing that when you have a massive user base, and they're going to get frustrated if things stop working. Your early adopters are going to be very okay with some rough edges, some beta software. And after that, they crave stability, right? And when shipping and breaking things starts affecting your bottom line, suddenly your marketing and sales teams are pushing against engineering, saying, that's cool that you guys shipped all this code and you introduced a new feature, but you basically made it so that our ad tracking doesn't work anymore. And our ad spend for yesterday is 0, which means that tomorrow when your RSUs vest, they're going to be worth less when like we have to announce quarterly results. I don't know if y'all saw that news recently about the Chrome team shipped out this feature that the ads team was very much against. And so they like sent these emails to them, basically CCing all sorts of people saying, oh, this feature that you guys shipped is going to result in a loss in revenue and it's going to result in the stock price going down and people are not going to like it. CCing 7 other people, right? So these heads start to butt at some point, and it's important for engineers to not just prioritize, oh, I got to get that code out, because your code is affecting other parts of the business, whether or not you understand it. So Move Fast and Break Things now has to deal with SLOs and error budgets and making sure that you don't break the site during a very important demo and stuff like that.
Maybe segue into a side topic. I was recently reading this book called The Phoenix Project. And in The Phoenix Project, there's this guy called Brent Geller, who's a senior developer. He's a sysadmin. He's brilliant, but he's also overworked. And Vic is showing us a copy of the book. Perfect. So for those of you who've read it, you'll probably relate. For those of you who haven't, Brent is a sysadmin. He's brilliant. He often has all the answers, but he's also severely overworked. And he's the only one who knows everything about the IT systems, right? So everyone goes to him for the fix because he's literally the only person in this company, Parts Unlimited, that can fix this issue, right? And I've often seen this at different companies in different phases, that there is this one person on a team that, and I say this in air quotes, the 10x engineer, right? So should we be incentivizing these 10x engineers or getting team members to strive to make it to that level? Or is this an anti-pattern where we've enabled one person to hold all the knowledge that we are incentivizing, so he can come and fix it in 2 minutes where somebody else would take 2 days, but that means your system or your service is down for 2 days, or just let this cowboy run the show and say, okay, at least we know whenever Brent is around, he got our back and we'll never have an outage. Our revenue is never impacted. We can keep the lights on, especially if that's the stage your company is in, right?
You and I learned different things from that book. So I'll say that first of all. So I have been Brent in that I've been the person with all this knowledge in my head, and like anywhere something broke, someone would come reach for me and I was overworked. The problem isn't that Brent is trying to be a hero. It's that he's overworked to a point where he's completely never documenting what went wrong, how did you fix it, right? So it's a failure in this ability to delegate. It's a failure in the ability to like grow other people. It's a failure in the ability to actually share your knowledge. And so it results in this person who is being failed by management and is also failing to remove themselves from the bottleneck. So Brent is this massive bottleneck in this book because I don't think he realizes he's this bottleneck. He's just constantly being pulled by everybody because he just like walks in and he like types a few keystrokes and he like fixes things. It's a very good book, by the way. The book that talks about basically like, it talks about DevOps methodologies and like lean shipping and all sorts of stuff. Very cool book. And there's a companion book to this, which comes from the other point of view, and I haven't read that yet. This one is the Phoenix Project, and then there's, I forget what the other one is called. There's something else. But yeah, so I don't think Brent is trying to be that kind of 10x engineer that I think you're trying to say, which is that there are these other people who truly don't care about the rules and jump in and do stuff and leave a trail of just mess in their wake, right? Because they're just like temporarily participating in your team. They're like, oh, I don't need to write tests. Like they write code and they outsource tests to your team, and then they move on to their next thing. And you realize within 2 weeks that they've written all this clever code that you hate and you throw it out. And really, what was the point? So that I think is a completely different thing. But now I forget what question you asked. I just jumped in here to Brent's defense.
Partly fictional, partly from the book. I wasn't meaning to pick on Brent.
Oh, should they be incentivized? That's what you asked. Should they be incentivized, right?
That was the question. And just before you jump in,
No, I think it's a failure. I don't think they should be incentivized.
Okay, so the sequel is called The Unicorn Project, which picks up where Phoenix Project left off. Sorry, you can continue.
It's basically like when you do jump in as the hero all the time. I forget how the saying goes. Heroes die, right? You don't. It's bad for everybody. This person is ultimately going to burn out and leave, and then now the person who could fix everything has left before they've documented anything. Like management should be protecting that person's time, but also not rewarding that behavior. They should be forcing them to document everything, because that's a failure. If one person is the bottleneck to everything, you don't reward that behavior ever. Because when you reward that behavior, you effectively incentivize everyone else to hoard knowledge. They're not going to document anything. They're going to become the MySQL person or like the whatever person. And then they will always want to be the person that gets called in for that. Why would they document anything? They're getting rewarded for this.
You're both bringing up this really good point, which I've never read the book. I don't know much about Brent, but I think the point that's coming up from this is that we spend a lot of time talking about how management inadvertently does things with incentives, but these incentives are also working on you as an individual. And you might be taking the complete wrong thing from the environment you're on. Like that environment is shaping you up, making you into something that is going to be bad for you long term. And so you just need to be conscious yourself of what kind of environment you're on and what sorts of incentives are acting on you, right? And we talk about 10x engineer. If you're a 10x engineer in this company that values and you're leaving a trail that values like technical excellence and you're leaving a trail of crap behind you, you're not gonna go very far at that company. But if you happen to be at an early stage startup, maybe they value that a lot. And I love, there was this great podcast today with Levels.io and this guy, Arvid Kahl, and it's about indie hacking. And what's really interesting about it is they got to this point where Levels, who has tons of experience, he's put out 100 different products, he's making...
You mean Peter Levels, not Levels.io.
Levels.io, Peter Levels is Levels.io. That's it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about his Twitter name.
Yeah.
My bad.
That's all right. And basically the guy's making millions, right? And he's an individual, he's got some contractors that help him here and there, but he's making it all on his own. And he's a developer. And, he says what happens is a lot of these people come to this world and they have too much baggage, right? What does that mean? That means the incentives were working on them. They were working on them for years to have all this technical excellence, to have all these things. And he says, these guys come here and they want to do dry, he says, right? Like just a simple example. Don't repeat yourself. And he says, that's a terrible thing to do when you're by yourself, to try to abstract things to get to the money. And so he says, don't do dry unless you've repeated yourself 10 times. And most of these guys can't handle that because the incentives have worked on them for so many years. They've been rewarded for doing things in this technical excellence way that they're just too slow. They're just too slow. And I run laps around them, he says. And it's just a fascinating thing to hear. And he's right. So you need to be conscious of I'm being conscious, right? Like I'm in this world now and I'm being conscious what incentives have worked on me. Like I'm a huge proponent of solid principles. I'm a huge proponent of all these things that have helped me throughout my career. But now these things are just my Achilles heel in some way. I need to forget these things for now. And it's just an important thing that I think a lot of people need to examine. Oh, who is it? Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. You got to examine your life and you got to figure out what incentives have shaped you up to this point and what environment are you in right now and what are the incentives that are being rewarded. Of course, your subconscious does a really good job of that, by the way, but you consciously thinking about it, I think is going to help you because you could drop certain things that were just, they were great for that environment, but we're no longer there anymore. Anyway, that was my sort of thought on that.
I think we can wrap it up here. I think this went a lot deeper, and I think we got all the panelists to share experiences and grievances and wounds that were many years old. But this goes to show, again, what you incentivize is what will stick, and not just in your current team, in your current organization, but those memories will stay with you long after, and consciously or subconsciously, they will be part of your story. On this happy note, we will call it a night. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, everyone, for watching.